So what's the process of actually helping someone be a better speaker? How do you go about helping them? What's a typical workshop or one-on-one coaching session look like? Now, I've been doing this for 30 years, and my methods have evolved over time. What I find is most successful is to simply have the client speak. I always start off by asking the person, before we begin today, tell me what your strengths are as a speaker, what are your weaknesses, and what do you want to get out of today? And I record them. And when I say at the beginning of the day, I mean if it's a 9 to 5 training session, at exactly 9 o'clock, I stand up and ask them those questions. I sit down 5 seconds later and I turn the camera on. Sometimes they're a little bit taken aback. That's okay. But the important thing is you've got them on tape and they have to watch themselves. Now, I'm going to give you all sorts of tips on how to be a better presentation coach. But here's the number one tip I have for you. Get people on video at least 10 times in a training session. Have them watch it each time and have them get to the point where they can look at a video of themselves and say, wow, that guy's really good, or that woman's really good. If I can be half as good as she is, I'll be the star of my industry. And they're pointing to a video of themselves. Now look, folks, I've written half a dozen books on public speaking, and I'm going to give you free links to most of them below here. I've done 10,000 videos on how to be a better speaker. But if you do that one thing, I guarantee you, you're going to have a huge impact on the clients you work with. Just keep getting them on video. Help them make small incremental changes. Get them used to watching themselves. Get them making improvement, and then get them to the point where they like what they see. If you do that, you are going to be a better presentation coach than 99% of the coaches out there, and probably 99.9% of college public speaking professors. Because here's the real flaw with most presentation training. It's that the trainer talks too much. The trainer gives way too much advice. Someone will speak and the trainer will give a 2-hour lecture saying everything wrong with what this person just did. And I used to be guilty of that myself. And the problem is not that you or I wouldn't give good advice on what the person did wrong. The problem is that doesn't really help anyone change. If you're going to be an effective presentation coach, you cannot lose sight of the objective. The objective is not to have your clients say you're brilliant. The objective is not to have your clients say, wow, this was a great day, this was a fun day, you're an interesting coach. You answered all my questions. That is not the goal of a good trainer. The goal of the training should be to have the person you're working with become great, to have new skills, to actually build new muscle memory, new habits, so that when they give a presentation, it's great. Other people realize it's great, and they feel it's great. That is your goal. Everything you do should take a back seat to that. Now, the biggest change in my practice over the last decade is I find the less I speak, the better the training session is, the more improvement the trainee sees. So please, you can disagree with me on a lot of other little points, but this one point of videotaping someone again and again and again until they like what they see, and doing it relatively quickly so they get comfortable with this process, that's one you can take to the bank, I assure you. Now, the next thing I do in most presentation trainings is I have asked the person to bring a presentation ready to give. And very quickly after they've watched the video themselves just talking about their strengths and weaknesses, I have them give their speech. I don't interrupt it at all. I tape it. I have them watch it. They then ask me what I think, and I say, I'll tell you, but not yet. I want to know what you think. And here's the reality. 98% of the time, when my clients, doesn't matter how successful they are, how many tens of millions of dollars they might make, how high a political office they have, they look at a video of their speech and they turn to me and they say, "Good God, TJ, I'm boring. I wouldn't want to watch me. What do you think?" And I turn to them and I say, you seem like a smart person. If you think it's really boring, guess what? It is. So what do we do then? We take the speech that they prepared, and maybe they spent hours and hours, or they had staff write. We take that speech, we tear it up and throw it away. We get a blank sheet of paper, an empty notepad, and I say, okay, let's start from scratch. I want you to brainstorm on every message point you can possibly think of. Then we're going to put it in priority. And then we're going to come up with just the top 5. That's going to be the outline of your speech. Then we're going to brainstorm on a story for each one of your messages. And that is going to go into your outline. If you do that, if you just get them to come up with an outline with 5 points and a story for each one, you will have dramatically elevated your client into the stratosphere. They will be speaking so much better than their peers, their colleagues, in their company, in their organization, in their own environment, whether it's politics, business, government, nonprofit. They will be dramatically better. So those are the first 2 really big tips I want you to focus on. Now, as a part of this training, I'm going to give you access to my 2 other presentation training courses here at this school. And if you don't see the links in the bottom, just email me and I will give you, at no extra charge, the links to the 2 schools where I go through all the basics of how to be a good speaker and advanced tips too. But those schools apply to anyone who wants to be a good speaker. You're trying to go beyond that. Your job is not just to be a good speaker, but you have to coach people on how to be a good speaker. There are many, many, many techniques involved. The worst technique is just to talk to people, to give them advice. The more you can pull out from them, the more you can make them realize they're boring. Because let's face it, every book in the world on public speaking says the same thing. They all say, don't do a data. Dale Carnegie was saying that 100 years ago. Don't read. Don't do a data dump. Illustrate with stories. They all say the same thing, and it's all good advice. The problem is, telling people that, in my experience, doesn't create changed behavior. Forcing someone to watch a video of themselves and to see how deadly dull they are, that's what makes the change. That's what makes the click. Realize this is critically important. You're not being judged on whether you give good advice, the right advice, the best advice. You're not being judged as a presentation coach based on how smart you are, how good you demonstrate the principles. You're judged on one thing and one thing alone. Did you change the actual skills of your client? And if you say, well, they just didn't take my advice, that means you failed, not them. So you've got to reach into the brain, you've got to reach into the psychology of your client and figure out what resonates with them. Quite often, someone will tell me in the pre-training questionnaire that they admire Winston Churchill as a speaker, and yet they'll get up and give a speech with lots and lots of big fancy words, jargon, buzzwords, insider lingo, and I'll simply remind them, hey, Winston Churchill, very learned man, wrote the 10-volume history of the English-speaking people, wrote numerous books, would pride himself being able to give a complicated speech on foreign policy, never using a word with more than 2 syllables. And he would constantly chastise his staff, telling them, you must realize there's a difference between how the eye absorbs words, which can be big, versus how the ear hears words. Those need to be small. So because someone's already told me they admire Winston Churchill, I can use examples that that person can relate to, and that's what makes it effective. If you want to be a great coach, you have to know a lot about speakers. You have to have favorites. You have to have people you don't like. You have to follow politicians in the news speaking and be able to analyze them, not on whether you like their politics or not, because no one really cares about your opinions of politics, because they don't care about mine. You have to develop a sense of figuring out what is effective and what is ineffective across the political spectrum and across the spectrum of business leaders, regardless of the industry. Focus on those things, and you are well on your way to being a great presentation coach.